As the US presidential race heats up, domestic issues continue to dominate the agenda. But what of Iraq? What do the various candidates propose to do? And how does the turmoil in this country shape strategies of the presidential hopefuls? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Hashim Ahelbara. After the biggest day so far in the US presidential race, nothing's certain yet. 24 states voted on Super Tuesday, but none of the front runners have yet managed to clinch their party's nomination. Senator John McCain has taken a big step forward in his bid to become Republican nominee, gaining a substantial lead over rivals Mitt Romney and Mike Huckabee. But in the Democrat camp, it's still a tight race between former First Lady Hillary Clinton and rival Barack Obama, bidding to become America's first black president. While recently the US economy has been top of the campaign agenda, so what about foreign issues and particularly Iraq? Here is what the main candidates have had to say about it. Well, while Clinton and Obama can agree that Iraq has been a mess, their views differ on how to proceed.
Because it's not only the work we have to do here at home, we have so much to do around the world to restore our leadership and our moral authority. And it starts with ending the war in Iraq and bringing our troops home as quickly and responsibly as possible.
I think that there is a sharp contrast in our attitude with respect to how we got into Iraq. I thought Senator Clinton described some of her approaches for going forward, but still has not adequately explained her vote to go into Iraq. And again, I think that's important because it speaks to the judgment that is going to be applied in future conflicts and how either of us would operate as commander-in-chief.
Joining now are our guests in Washington, D.C., Rob Ritchie. He is the executive director of Fair Vote, an organization that examines the effect of voting system on governance and participation. In Cairo, Abdullah Shleifa, he is professor at the American University in Cairo. And in Doha, Edmond Gharib, he is a professor at Georgetown University. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for joining us. Before going into detail about the main candidates' position on foreign policy, and particularly Iraq, let me start by asking Mr. Ritchie in Washington, D.C., primaries are usually a national or domestic contest, but has foreign policy been a very significant issue this time, particularly Iraq? Was it an overriding issue?
It wasn't in the yesterday. It's an overall defining element of the campaign. As we heard from the clip leading into this, Barack Obama is hammering away at the fact that Hillary Clinton voted to authorize the war in 2003 at a time when he spoke against it. And that right now, their policy proposals looking forward don't seem to be very different, but that's this defining difference that has defined, I think, for him, that he's taking the country in a new direction, and Hillary Clinton implicitly would be taking it potentially backwards because it's back to when her husband was president. So it's this sort of forward-backward definition, and that vote in 2003 is the way that he often defines that difference.
Mr. Edmond Gharib, do you agree that the Iraqi issue is fading now as an issue which is topping priorities in the primaries?
There's no doubt that the economic issue has emerged as a very important issue, as concerns about economic recessions, as Americans are becoming concerned about their pockets. All of this is influencing both the discourse as well as the views of the voter. Nevertheless, Iraq remains a very important issue for the average voter. We saw it also in the last debate. It was mentioned during the last debate between the Democrats about 27 different times. It was also came up among the Republican candidates. It became a very important issue, but I think it will come down also as an important one down the road.
Well, since you agree, gentlemen, that while it's not that overriding, still it's one of the major issues. Let me ask Abdullah Shleifa in Cairo. We've heard both Clinton and Obama talking about Iraq. Do you think that the initial position of Obama to stand against the invasion would provide him with a slight edge over Hillary Clinton in the future?
Well, it will if Iraq becomes much more of a central issue than it is right now. And it was much more central to the debates just 3-4 months ago. Two things have happened. One, as Edmund mentioned, that the economy is a very serious problem now in the States. And secondly, from an American perspective, Iraq does not seem quite as dangerous and lethal as it did 3-4 months ago, simply because American casualties are down. And what that's to be attributed to is a whole other issue. But I think Iraq could come back as a major issue, not necessarily in the intense campaign that lies ahead between Hillary Clinton and Obama. I think it can come back after both parties have finally selected their candidates, because that's going to be a big issue, particularly if John McCain is the candidate of the Republicans. He's very forthright in his support of the war.
Okay.
He was critical tactically, but he supported the war.
Mr.
So
Ritchie.
that's where we're going to see a big debate.
Okay, Mr. Ritchie, the Republicans, and mainly Mr. Bush during the last 10 years, used the fear factors and efficient tool during the both elections 2000 and 2004. Do you think that the Democrats would definitely use Iraq because they know that they have advantage over the Republicans over this issue?
Even though it's not a front page story in the same kind of way it was just a few months ago, and not something the voters mentioned first necessarily when asked about what's first on their minds, it is going to be a big issue, as was just said, this November, because it's a very clear defining difference, not only looking backwards but looking forwards. And the American people think the war was a mistake at this point, and I think none of what has happened in the last few months has changed that. And I think it's going to go from a debate within their parties, where the parties essentially are relatively aligned with what they have done on this issue or are proposing to do, to going in November when they're very different.
Now that we have talked about the Democrats, let's see the Republican stance on this issue. While McCain now leads the Republican race by a fair margin, he and his closest rival, Mitt Romney, have both shown they're not rushing to leave Iraq without improving the situation first, but they still disagree.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And these Democrats as well, they want to just pull our troops out. Did you see them at their debate the other night? You probably didn't. But if you did, they just want to pull the troops out. They don't care about the consequences. They were asked, what's more important to you, that we win or that we get out? And their answer in every single case was get out, but not us. Win is essential, and we won't leave until we've won.
And we, Lindsey Graham, I, the President, and others, said this is what needs to be done, no matter what the consequences are. Governor Romney obviously said there had to be, quote, timetables, although they had to be secret, because we weren't going to tell the enemy when we were leaving. I mean, that's just a fact. And if we'd have done that, as the Democrats and some Republicans wanted to do, we would have lost that surge, and al-Qaeda would be celebrating a victory over the United States of America.
Gentlemen, McCain and Romney seem to justify their stance over Iraq, saying that we have had to maintain that position because we want to restore the leading role of the United States of America, and at the same time we don't want to give the a pretext for the al-Qaeda to feel that they have won the struggle over the Americans. Mr. Edmond Gharib, do you think that the Americans would buy into this rhetoric, which seems to me personally divorced from reality?
I think one of the things that we have to remember is that while there is a great deal of opposition to the war itself, there's a great deal of opposition that many Americans, as the polls have shown, that it was a mistake to go to war. Nevertheless, there's still disagreement among the American public as to what is the best course to take from here on forward. But I agree with you. I think this is going to become a very important issue between the Republicans and the Democrats. So far, the debate has been heated between the different candidates, Republicans and Democrats, about Iraq. For example, if we paid attention to what Romney said and also what McCain said during the last debate. For example, McCain criticized Romney. He said that both Hillary Clinton and Romney want to surrender in Iraq, and the United States must not do that. And of course, Romney criticized him very sharply on that.
A very divisive issue indeed. Mr. Abdullah Shleifa in Cairo, do you think now that Republican strategists will definitely have to look in a different way about the Iraqi issue in the future? Because we know that's one of the big problems for McCain, for example, if he has in the future to rally the support of a wider vote.
Well, Hesham, what McCain has going for him is the fact that he can argue that whatever successes seem to be appearing now on the ground in Baghdad or in Iraq is attributed to the surge, and that he was for the surge before the concept even existed. He was critical of the earlier conduct of the war. He felt there should have been a lot more American troops in there, a lot more backup, a lot more equipment. So the very maverick position he took, where he was critical of the war while supportive of it, gives him a bit of an edge compared to, let's say, the classic Republican position, which he can say, look, the war was fought wrong. Now they're fighting it more correctly. And so he has a certain chance of passing himself off both as a supporter of the war and a critic of the war.
But then one has to ask the following question. We know that the Republicans know that the Democrats have some edge over them with regard to this issue, because the polls suggest that the next Democratic candidate will definitely win the elections. Mr. Ritchie in Washington, D.C., don't you think that the Republicans need to review the rhetoric with regard to Iraq? Because in the past they had the value vote and they had those who supported Iraq. Now it seems that a majority is growing more and more against the policies in Iraq.
Well, just so an international audience knows how this voting process works, right now they're competing for voters within their party, and so they need to talk a certain talk, they need to build majorities within their party, and then they need to turn around in November and try to win majorities among all voters.
And that's where
you often see this kind of
major issue. Is that correct?
It does, and you often see some different emphasis on positions, or even sometimes something that could be called a reversal or at least a modification. John McCain is very clear where he is, and I think that his whole success within the party has been tied to the relative success of the surge in doing what some people hoped it would do, a sort of a decline in violence and so on.
Very interesting.
And that.
Very interesting to see how events will evolve in the future.
And looking forward, he has a great difficulty in changing his position, which I think is going to make it difficult for him, frankly.
Well, gentlemen, time for a short break. When we come back, we take a close look at the impact of the ever-increasing cost of the U.S. presence in Iraq on the race to the White House. Stay with us.